Hello everybody, how's it going? It's Ben and welcome to another episode of the Bonnie Rackham. We're at the halfway point of season 3 now, so yeah, let's get straight into this one and get a title sorted.
Get us underway.
Okay, so this one I've decided to call Pirates and Slaves. So this is the episode where in terms of the Maroons and the Walrus crew, Flint suggests bringing them all together as one force to the Queen. So yeah, we have a literal translation of Pirates and Slaves for the title, but a lot of our dynamics tie in as well to this theme of the episode. Eleanor and Max reunite, Eleanor even calls her a pirate, Woodes Rogers shows himself as a bit of a pirate, Mr. Scott leading two lives, you know, a slave and a pirate sort of thing. You can tie it into most of this episode, so yeah, I think that sort of works. So yeah, let's get into this one, into Pirates and Slaves, and let's get a rating and a quick summary sorted.
First item.
Okay, so this one is written, once again, the usual two, Jonathan E. Steinberg and Robert Levine. And this one is directed by Alec Sakharov, and we last saw him in the director's chair for the first episode of this season. Okay, so yeah, another fantastic episode to get into. A bit of a transitional episode as we get into the second half of the season. Eleanor and Woodes Rogers finally get to Nassau, and there's a tense reunion for Eleanor and Max. Max meets Woodes Rogers and makes her play, but Mrs. Hudson has a secret to reveal that will upset everything. Vane and Teach pick off seemingly where they left off all those years ago, but Vane is still distracted. Flint is granted an audience with the Queen, but is still seemingly so adrift and not in his right mind, so how will he play it? While this is still busy and a strong episode, I think I might have to pull the ranking back a bit. It's not quite competing with those episodes in the 9s for me. I'm still going to give it a very strong 8.7. So yeah, at the halfway point of the season, as per usual now, let's check in on how the episode rankings are now looking 5 episodes into a strong season. So let's have a quick check-in on the episodes that are just outside the top 10, but you know, worthy of a strong mention. But yeah, we got a few 8.7s, mostly season 2, but Pirates and Slaves, the episode just watched, that makes it in as well. A couple of season 1 episodes just about hanging on in the mention spot, but yeah, let's get to the big guns and the top 10. And yeah, and this is how the top 10 is looking. So yeah, Avalanche in at first place with a comfortable 10 out of 10. Penultimate episode from last season. No shame, of course, still right up there. The Eye of the Storm comes in as the highest so far from this season. Adrift is in at 5 still. A really great episode that I think I still rate a lot highly the most. And yeah, and just some others, you know, that are still making it in. Season 8 still has Shifting Sands just about creeping in that top 10, but some really strong episodes so far, and we still have 15 more to go. Okay, so let's get started in the character deep dives.
Next item.
So we're going to begin on Nassau, and we're going to do Max, Eleanor, and Woodes Rogers, and kind of Mrs. Hudson comes into it, but we're not really going to go too into her yet. So finally, Eleanor and Woodes Rogers, they make it to Nassau soil. It seems they've been on the seas for a while now, a few episodes. Woodes Rogers and his associates start making an old establishment of Mr. Guthrie's into a base camp of operations. Like we see with Vane this episode, on seeing Eleanor last episode and being a bit unsettled, Eleanor is also a little bit out of sorts after being so close to Vane and hearing his name mentioned in this scene. Woodes Rogers notices this and reassures her he won't be coming back and is no longer a part of Nassau's story. Of course, he would be very wrong, and I wonder if at this point she knows that as well. Tough to know if she's unsettled because she won't get her revenge in thinking, you know, he's gone forever, or she knows one way or the other he'll be back one day. Hornigold informs Woodes Rogers that they have secured the gold in the fort, and she inquires about Jack and Anne. Yeah, as much as I'm a bit meh with Eleanor this season, I do love it anytime she kind of addresses Hornigold and just how he hates it, how he hates, you know, that she's risen again to this kind of status. And when Woodes Rogers sort of inquires, you know, on her wanting to know this, she says to him, although the majority are playing ball at the moment, she knows there are a few to watch out for. Of course, a bit of history as well with them. And yeah, he's the cat that got the cream at the moment, and clearly he's underestimated how many bumps in the road there might be, but she knows. But yeah, back to all this power play and people management being referred to as a game. His language, is definitely rubbing off on her now. She says she needs to know where all the players are if she's to be of any use to him. He asks when does she presume this game begins, and she says it already has. Of course, she has a big player of this game to go and deal with herself in a moment. The new queen, you could say. In fact, Max does say, pretty much. So yeah, speaking of Max, yeah, she is sat in the tavern just looking stunning. Just looking an absolute picture. I mean, she always looks stunning, but she will know, I think, the new governor has landed, so she'll be putting in extra effort, to make an impression, I think. But yeah, a funny little scene with Featherstone and Adele. He's got his pardon, and he wants to know if she'll still want to be with him now that he's a wanted man. Still hard to tell where Adele is with that. A funny little look she exchanges with Max, like, oh God, help my life, sort of thing. And I think she's just sort of stuck with him at this point. A reluctant love affair, maybe. I'm still not quite sure, because I don't think she needs to be with him now if she doesn't want to be. However, their attention is drawn to the arrival of some redcoats, and to be fair to Eleanor, this is how you make a powerful entrance. My God, yeah, what a shot this is. Yeah, last time she was on Nassau, she was gagged and bound by English authority, and now she has them as her escort. Both these ladies have done so well to get themselves to where they are at this stage, it has to be said. So Max takes Eleanor to her old office, which of course is now hers, and yeah, just a fantastic scene between them both. Really, I love this one. I really love their dynamic, from here on out. I've liked it up till now, but it's really interesting going forwards. Yeah, some posturing from Max, but she's earned that right though. And Eleanor can see she's made herself at home in the short time she's been there. And Max gives her props on getting out of her situation and returning. But although I think she's a little bit shocked on the surface, in reality, even though she's sort of playing it off a bit. Although on the surface, for most part, they're starting off pretty civil, they're giving each other their dues. There's a really kind of catty undertone between them both, kind of just simmering there, and it keeps, it keeps coming to the surface every so often. Eleanor has a little barb at Max, and she notes the positioning of the desk and how she will have the sun in her eyes come the summer, but she wouldn't know that because she's not been sitting in that chair for long enough. And then Eleanor informs her of what's happening going forwards. Woodes Rogers is forming a council, and Max inquires if she will have a space on that council, but I think she already knows the answer before Eleanor tells her no. But Eleanor wants her blessing though. She knows that Max, has all her fingers in all the pies and could make it difficult for them if she chooses to. And yeah, Max bigs herself up a bit, says she has the streets, allies and friends. I play the game much better than you ever did, she's saying. People trust me, and yeah, again it gets a little bit tense between them, and Eleanor calls her a pirate, which Max doesn't like. Remember Max's fears kind of late last season when learning of Eleanor's arrest. Could a woman be tried and hung for piracy? That will very much be coming into play with Max's motivations this episode, I think. So yeah, Eleanor informs her that Woodes Rogers wanted names of pirates that could be a problem, and she mentioned her. And yeah, Max, again, she's not happy with this, as I don't think she was counting on Eleanor returning, so that has made her plans a bit more difficult. Yet she can't play both sides quite like she has been, and that she was hoping to continue doing so, I don't think, because Eleanor knows the game. No, she wasn't as good at it as Max, she still knows the game. But then Eleanor pleads a little bit, and she wants her to spread the word that Woodes Rogers is genuine. Yeah, she says if Max undermines that, he can make life very difficult for her. So yeah, he really is rubbing off on her. He is a good man, he wants to do great things, but if you don't comply, he might get really nasty. Bit of a counter to her pleas, that he's a good man. But yeah, I love that Max just doesn't back down and she sticks up for herself, she sits tall, stands tall, and yeah, she says, you should know, people do not speak to me that way anymore. Go Max. Stick up for yourself, girl. Yeah, and Eleanor, I think she can respect that a bit. But yeah, even though this has been a tense meeting, I think it ends up with some understanding, between them both by the end, and a little bit of respect. Before she leaves, Max asks if she was on her execution list. Eleanor says no and fires back pretty quickly. Did she tell Hornigold where she was the day she was arrested? And Max says no. I believe both of them. Yeah, I believe both of them myself personally. Do they believe each other, is the question. I think so. but it's hard to tell. Because they both, they both got pretty good bluff games sometimes, so especially Max. But yeah, such a great scene, the back and forth power play, the parallels between these two women, where they are, where they've been, a lot of history between them, a lot of differences, but as maybe both can see now here, a lot of similarities as well now. Max holds her own well, like I say, but it's made clear to her seat here, it will only do so much now, this power she's gained. As it stands, she will still mostly be on the outside, looking in, and yeah, she knows she needs something else to secure her eyes and ears with the new governor. So that's what she does. Again, the confidence of this woman is just amazing. She just walks into a busy room, with Woodes Rogers full of his men. Eleanor is there as well. She's just strolls in, ballsy as you like. Pretty much a similar sort of entrance that Eleanor just made into her establishment. She's saying, anything you can do. And yeah, and she asks for a word in private, and Eleanor, of course, joins them upstairs. And as they go up the stairs, we see Mrs. Hudson watching on nervously. So yeah, she makes her plea, something we already know from her conversation with Anne a couple of episodes. She says she can't endorse this with her being on the outside looking in. She knows she can be an ally, but she wants to be fully involved as much as possible. And yeah, she says, you say you want to be a friend of Nassau? Well, I am Nassau. That might be quote of the episode for me. Such a great Max quote. So she's willing to give up her share of the gold to secure this. And yeah, this conversation all gets a bit exposition-y, and one of those things that doesn't really matter anyway, because it's all about to change in the next scene, with Mrs. Hudson's bombshell. I still don't understand a lot of the intricacies in what Spain knows, in how much money they had, how much they're expecting to get back. It always gets a bit lost on me, because it moves about a lot. But yeah, it seems anyway, either way, it seems a bit of a risky play by Max, kind of laying all her cards down immediately, showing her hand immediately. And Eleanor works out straight away, she's helped herself to a share of the gold. But Max explains the money is non-traceable and an investment, and Woodes Rogers, he wonders what she wants in exchange. She says an end to prodding of her past, she wants to move on. Again, maybe Eleanor calling her a pirate has really hit her, and she's going back a little bit to those fears I kind of mentioned. In some way, like we'll see with Jack in a little bit, this is Max buying her own pardon, I think, and a place in this new Nassau. That's almost what she's sort of doing. She's sort of buying herself a pardon. Because even though she doesn't really need to get one, that they're all signing, this sort of, it's a quiet one, isn't it? It's a kind of business deal one. But, yeah, but so far, she's keeping Jack and Anne out of it. She hasn't mentioned them and that they've got a pile of it either. So she's staying loyal. But yeah, I think this is another really strong Max episode. She's staying strong, sticking up for herself when she realises Eleanor has made some good points in their conversation, and she's had a think, and she's thought, what's the point in all this money if I'm going to lose my power here anyway, my seat at the table? Yes, soon she's going to start to go too far with it and really start to parallel the Eleanor of the past, with the betrayal and the choices that she's going to have to make soon. But I'm still going to give Max an MVP nomination for this episode. Okay, so with Max's take laid out in front of them both now, she's gone, Max is gone, the temptation is there for Woodes Rogers. Of course he'll take it. We know the man he really is, and he will make excuses to justify it. He sort of does, good fortune smiling down on us, blessing this, or, something like that he says. Who's he trying to convince, her or himself? Maybe a bit of both. It's not the him taking it part, that kind of annoys me. Yeah, it's seemingly untraceable money with little needed in exchange, he's just got to keep Max in the loop a little bit. Who in their right mind isn't taking it? It's him poorly justifying it, after all his posturing and all that, throwing his morals and his supposedly loyalty pact with Spain out the window so easily, it's kind of that. And yeah, Eleanor's reaction is really interesting. Can she see it? I think maybe she can. Can she see through this facade just in this moment? This honourable man, that he's played really well so far. Is she seeing here, oh, he's kind of doing exactly what I would have done, what I did, what my father did, what Max did. Is this going to be the same story, different face? Maybe there's more going on and it is just attraction, but I do feel that she's like, you know, and when she questions him in a moment, yeah, you can just really see her silently going through it. And yeah, a great bit of acting here by Hannah New. And yeah, after their scene earlier, is this a really clever play by Max, both getting her a clean slate, you know, in a place in the table, in the discussions, but also at the same time maybe showing Eleanor this guy will be no different. You know, money, bribes, it always beats out morals and good intentions, and is most leaders' motivation in the end. Maybe I'm overcrediting Max, I think, maybe a little bit, but equally, I wouldn't be surprised, you know, if that was a little thing she was doing as well. But yeah, I do think Eleanor, you know, when she questions him here, you know, a bit in understanding, you know, she's sort of understanding there's a bit more behind the mask, if you like. So much so that she sort of asks him about his scar, you know, what really happened. And yeah, and he sort of hesitates a second, and he says combat with a Spanish galleon, stray bomb, you know, something like that, and he says his brother was killed. And I still can't remember what Teach's tie-in with this, because I'm sure he's lying here, and it was a crew with Teach on that actually did it, you know, that caused his scar and killed his brother. But had the writers thought of that yet? I don't know. Had they planned for it? I like to think that they probably have, and know that they're, you know, where they're going with Wiz Rogers here, and that they're going to be making him the big bad, so to speak. But Eleanor has bought this story, you know, which in this moment, which is the main thing for him. And yeah, she touches his scar, and they gaze into each other's eyes a moment. Yeah, and it's about to happen, and they kiss, but it's cut very short by Mrs. Hudson. But yeah, really interesting scene between them, you know, for rewatchers, especially this one. I thought he was still okay at this point, first watch. Like Eleanor, I bought what he was selling quite a lot. I think he came close here to being unmade a bit by her, and he made a good recovery. Or am I selling Eleanor short? And, you know, has she worked it out a little bit and is using it to her advantage? Again, you know, just two manipulative people. Just, yeah, such a difficult and different dynamic to observe on the rewatch. So many layers you can get lost in, and you're never really quite sure what's going on in either one of their minds, especially when it comes to each other. But I think there is a bond starting that's not just using each other. You know, I think it started as that, definitely, but there is something else forming. They're buying each other's BS a little bit, maybe, I think is what's happening. So Mrs. Hudson, so yeah, she's knocked on the door. Obviously she cuts them short, and yeah, she reveals that she's been spying for the Spanish. Now, we know there's some stuff that she's keeping back, and again, I can't remember the intricacies of all that in terms of plot, because otherwise, you know, she would have informed him here that they're using her own children as leverage. So this is obviously a play in a game we as rewatchers know that she's being forced to make. But whatever the exact rules of this game are, I can't remember until we come to it. So we're going to have to come back to her when that all comes up again. But important thing is, she's making it clear in this moment that money that Max just gave him, that is standing in front of them, it will be missed. The Spanish know of it, and they want it back. Yeah, and you can see in his face he's not happy. Had probably already spent, you know, most of that money in his head. Almost like having a winning, you know, lottery ticket. He was ready to cash out, just being ripped up and made void right in front of him. You know, she says outside the door just now she was faced with two choices. Report back to the Spanish and they retaliate, you know, with violence, burning Nassau to the ground. Or she could do what she's doing now and warn him of the full scope of the danger if he doesn't return the money. Although he's clearly disappointed and understandably angry, he is taking her for her word, so which again, you know, I am sure there is another twist to come, and, you know, we haven't got to all that yet with her. But yeah, so he says he will return it all and asks her to relay that, but she says no. Basically, she tells him that, you know, the money Max gave him is only half of the chunk of money that's owed. Again, you know, plot-wise, this is actually quite complicated, but all that needs, you know, really matter in the moment for sake of story is Jack and Anne, along with their fortune, now have wanted marks on their backs. So yes, speaking of, let's chat Jack and Anne. Very short little scene with them. They're on the move, you know, they're nearly off Nassau, and yeah, and they're heading to a boat. And yeah, the mood seems much the same, but they have somewhat of a plan of action. But Jack is still clearly quite distracted. They're sort of talking their plans, going through it, you know, they're going to hop around a bit, use a couple of aliases while they sort of work it out. And yeah, although that was Jack's plan, as Anne points out, he's not keen suddenly, you know, they're this close to leaving Nassau forever, but he really doesn't want to lose his name. I'm completely with Anne here, shock horror. But no, not just because it's Anne, but no, I'm completely with Anne here. While I can understand his reasons, he's a proud man and his name is important to him, but all they got to do is just bide a bit of time, bluff it for a bit. Use a couple of aliases, until they settle, and then business as usual. Pretty much what Anne says to him. But Jack, knowing these pardons are being handed out, he can't see the dangers of going back at this stage. He can't see the danger that puts them in. Anne knows it's foolish at this point, tells him we've beat the game. We're at the end. A few more steps and they win the game. They're away, with enough money to do what they want with. But yeah, Jack Rackham, he can't lose his name, he says. Not, after all he's been through. First he sort of suggests they both go, but then she, when he sees how much she sort of protests, he's like, no, it's probably better, you stay in cover, watch the treasure, I'll be back before you know it. And he gives her a little kiss on the hat, and a wave as he sort of goes, as he heads back to Nassau. Yeah, why does bad shit always happen when these guys part for a little while? It's just, it's not good. Don't do it, guys. We don't like it. Of course, all this would probably be safe, I think, if Mrs. Hudson hadn't have put a spanner in the works. He probably would have got away with it. But it's still a really risky move to me, from Jack knowing there's a new governor about and not really knowing the ins and outs of all that yet. And considering how quickly plans fell apart when Hornigold announced them, I'm surprised Jack wants a part in the pardons at all. I mean, they're going to be non-void anyway if he and Anne just go back on the account, as we assume they would at some point. Yeah, he's had a good couple of episodes, but this is not the greatest decision, I don't think, and it's going to lead to some tough times for them both. But obviously, it's great for plot, and that's what it's there for. So yeah, I get that. But I do think Jack Rackham is a little bit smarter than this usually. But a small scene with my faves. But yeah, another decision with so many consequences to come in future episodes. Okay, so let's move on to father and son-like double act, Vane and Teach. So yeah, Vane and Teach are on the seas heading to Okanoke. Yeah, and I completely forgot, or I just never realised how many men actually did still stick with Vane. It's quite the impressive fleet they have. I just forgot that many men did still stick around. So yeah, this is the dream for Teach, what he's always wanted. Charles Vane at his side at the head of a terrifying fleet. But we'll see in this episode that Vane is still discontent with his lot at the moment. While things weren't really working out on Nassau without Flint, this is still not really the dream for Vane like it is for Teach. Teach can tell that he's a bit distant, and I think he assumes it's mostly Eleanor, which is definitely a big part of it, I think, on seeing her, assuming her as dead, all this time in his mind. He's been able to move on a bit, but now seeing her, last episode in the flesh, it's probably a lot of stuff going on, a lot of history. And Teach observes this, and yeah, I love the writing for Teach. It's how opposite they are, how opposite they speak. Their conversations oddly remind me of Jack and Anne's in some ways. Vane, like Anne, is just straight to the point. Can't be arsed with adding frills and tiptoeing around a truth, yet can still drop a bar every now and again, can still drop a real kind of gem. Whereas Teach and Jack kind of dance around their point a bit, don't they, a lot? There's a backstory before we get to the crux of it. There's a moral, and, they tell the backstory differently. But they have the same sort of methods. So yeah, I think the writers always get this balance right with, with the characters they have interacting. Too much interaction between certain characters just wouldn't work. Imagine, like if Flint and Teach had, because they're quite similar, if they had too many scenes together, it would just get a bit much, and you'd just be like, oh, come on, we're telling stories. That's, do you know what I mean? So yeah, like I say, Teach can tell Vane isn't settled and starts talking about one of his wives and how she was a bit superstitious, had these pockets of complete madness, he says. But he humoured them, for a time, and he even keeps up with a couple of the superstitions himself, just through habit, even though he hasn't seen her in years, and, and he thinks it's madness. And yeah, Vane not sure what point he's trying to make and just asks, what the fuck are you talking about? And Teach, he sort of brings it all back to Eleanor and the power of a woman over a man. He says it's far harder to dispose the marks over the woman who left them. Teach knows, all their history will be on Vane's mind as he's leaving Nassau. But I think in his way, he's trying to tell him to sort of move on. You know, and he wonders, can Vane cling on to the truth he knows makes them both of the same mind? A lion keeps no den because the savannah belongs to him. And Vane observes, you know, whenever he spoke like that, everyone thought he was mad, you know, and didn't understand what he was trying to get at. So yeah, just showing us also how alike these two guys are in many ways as well. But yeah, we'll see in a moment, they're not on the same page with everything. But yeah, both a bit of advice he's given to Vane and also a good bit of insight into why Teach has also clearly hopped about a bit over the last few years. It ties in well to his next move. He thinks himself a lion, just won't take. When I'm ready to move, I will, because I've got that right. You know, he's very, very alpha. So yeah, they spot a Spanish ship, and yeah, Teach wants to board and take the prize. But Vane is hesitant. I love the power Teach holds, you know, with just a look. You know, the lookout or their crew member, you know, he obviously knows Spanish was off the table before, so he's about to protest, but just a glare from Teach, and he's like, yep, you know, and he gets straight to it. Don't mess with Spanish ships was clearly a sort of unspoken rule him, Flint and Jack agreed to, you know, not to further mess with them because, you know, how it could mess things up on Nassau. You know, and when Vane tells him this, you know, Teach observes as Nassau is not part of his life anymore. It's not something he has to worry about. And yeah, they sort of get to attacking. But of course, it's not as easy as that for Vane. You can't just forget and not care about something that's been, you know, part of your life for years. Sort of calling back to what he was just saying, woman and his wife, and you could also say Vane's the same way with Nassau, not just Eleanor. So yeah, it's sort of echoing that a little bit. Yeah, I think it's a tough love sort of type thing Teach is doing, trying to just kind of rip the cord for Vane. But it's a cord he's clearly not ready to let go of. You know, we can see that as an audience. Yeah, it's a pretty straightforward board. You know, the Spanish put up a fight, but they're no match for their fleet. I do love seeing the respect, you know, that Vane shows for his opponent here. And yeah, this dying man sort of observes how close they were to the roles being reversed. It could be Vane lying there dying if one move had gone, you know, a different way, and Vane sort of agrees. And Vane asks, why did they surrender? And this is quite a sad, depressing an answer. If they gave up, you know, their opponents get a prize, and, you know, the captains likely never get work again, you know, because he'll be seen as a coward or a failure, etc. But if they fight, sometimes money goes to their families as compensation when they die. So, yeah, and the man says he was a soldier once, you know, and he says it's funny how the money makes sheep of us all. You know, never really taken that into account before, but Vane will use the word sheep in that episode. You know, so I don't know if that plays on his mind a bit. But yeah, and then the dying man brings up what they were carrying, gave them no option for surrender anyway. So yeah, below deck, Teach comes across a man burning some papers, and on seeing Teach, the guy just shoots himself. And yeah, a little later, with Vane now below, Teach tells him it's Spanish intelligence, but they're not sure what exactly. And Teach takes the papers and says they're something of nothing, just notes. Mrs. Hudson's most likely, I assume. But yeah, not useful to them unless they're interested in raiding Nassau, to which we have no interest, right? You know, he sort of asks. And Vane says sternly, you know, almost like he's a bit tired of Teach keep bringing it up now. He says, no, they don't. And yeah, Teach just chucks the papers on the floor. I can't remember if Vane picks them up. But yeah, not really much more to say on these guys that I haven't already, you know, these last couple of episodes. But yeah, as great and, you know, formidable a team up as they could be, after finally understanding Flint and forming their alliance, his death, you know, and the fallout from it has hit Vane, you know, so has having to leave Nassau behind. So yeah, this episode has ultimately just been setting up that sort of betrayal that's to come next episode between these two. Betrayal's maybe a bit too harsh a word, but or return, you know, return may be a kinder word. You know, a return to Nassau. I think Teach is trying to convince himself almost that Vane won't take if given the opportunity, but we can see, you know, yeah, it's going to happen. And obviously, with what's to come with the Walrus crew, we know, you know, it's only a matter of time now. So yeah, let's get on to the Walrus crew. Okay, again, everybody's just kind of all tied in. Yeah, it's just easier to talk about them all at once at the moment because there's too much going on. They all start separating a little bit next episode, so it'll be a bit easier. So yeah, it's the next day, the next morning, and Maddie has obviously bought them a bit of time because they're still alive. Yeah, a wounded Mr. Scott and the freed slaves make it to the Maroon Island. I think Mr. Scott arriving so soon, you know, it really confused me as to where this island is actually meant to be located. it must be super close to Nassau for them to be able to make it in a rowing boat overnight, with a dying man, which both makes sense and doesn't. It makes sense that, Mr. Scott has been able to zip about from one to the other with ease, like, he apparently has been all this time. But at the same time, it seems super risky and unrealistic. They wouldn't have been fully discovered by now. By Nassau, a big part, by just someone on Nassau. And also, if the Walrus crew was so close to Nassau anyway, why didn't they just push on for an extra half a day to make it home? Do you know what I mean? Rather than kind of risk this uncharted, this island they don't know. Because they'd have all their courses, wouldn't they, and all that, their navigation. They'd know they'd be close to home. So yeah, it all seems a little bit of a plot hole for me to try and make this Mr. Scott tie-in work. But, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, so onwards. Okay, yeah, so this episode, it actually opens with one of Flint's daydreams, his visions with Miranda. Possibly the last one. I can't remember if we get, like, a final kind of goodbye at some point in the next episode, maybe next couple of episodes. My memory for plot details this season is really bad. I'm having to really stick to the episodes in question, unless it's kind of a big moment, or Anne's in the scene. I know it if Anne's in the scene. Because, yeah, of all the little details that we have at this point, there's just, like I say, so many intricacies. So Flint is at a crossroads now this episode. It's really time to make a decision. Really time to make a do or die literal decision. As usual, the way this vision is shot is just stunning. And yeah, with that haunting visual of death in the fog as well, just fantastically done. So yeah, Flint's talking to Miranda about his first encounter with death as a child by way of coming across a dead dog. His first curiosity at what death would feel like. And then they sort of continue a bit. Miranda says, "You resented me because we were so close and I threw it all away. And if you join me now, what if I resented you for the same reason?" In his subconscious, she's still trying to talk him out of this funk, I think. Talk him to sense. Again, I still think this is him, all his mind, and he's just doing what you do, when you lose someone, you sort of speak for them, for yourself, come on, they wouldn't want this, snap yourself out of it. That's sort of what he's doing here, I think. That's how I interpret all this anyway. And yeah, he asks, what would I be throwing away? And she says, "You can't see it yet, can you? You are not alone." And yeah, I'm not sure if this is Silver, Vision Miranda / his subconscious means. It could equally mean the Maroons and joining up with them. But yeah, alone, a moment in the fog, a bugle being blown wakes him up, back to reality where they all see Mr. Scott being brought to camp. So yeah, Mr. Scott's wounds are being treated, he's not looking good. He's not looking in good shape at all. And Flint has been allowed out of his cage to speak to him. By order of Mr. Scott, I'm going to have to assume. He's obviously, he's surprised to see Flint alive. He thought him dead like everyone else, defeated by Hornigold. And Flint says they only ever have half the story, don't they? Just another great line, casually dropped. That could be a tagline, just another tagline for the whole bloody show. You could just see that on a poster. So Mr. Scott updates him a bit, all on Nassau's fall, informs him that Teach is back in the picture, and that he slipped away with Vane and most of the men, that were for this vision. "I wonder if ever a war so loudly anticipated ended so quickly," Mr. Scott says. Don't get too ahead of yourself, mate. Don't get too ahead of yourself. So yeah, Flint asks him, how he managed to do all this, lead both these lives. And yeah, we get a bit of background. How after, the raid of the Spanish years ago, he took his wife and Maddie to safety on this island, and told Mr. Guthrie and people that they had died. And yeah, it makes sense that a man like Mr. Guthrie wouldn't bother to fact check at all. And once Eleanor took over, he says he was able to juggle between both worlds a lot easier. He encouraged her sort of the way she did things. And yeah, Flint says, "For as long as I have known you, you have been two wholly separate men." Bit similar as well there, a little bit similar there. But yeah, you could say that, two different characters, you could also say. But yeah, now he's injured, dying, he can no longer manage both worlds, putting everyone in his care in danger. And so he asks Flint for his help. So yeah, back in the cage, Flint informs the crew of the proposed partnership, using this island as sort of a base of operations, a new kind of Nassau, if you like. They will go on the account to fetch supplies for them. But yeah, while Mr. Scott does have authority, he doesn't have the final word. The Queen does. And yeah, she's still wary. But Flint's going to be given an audience with her to convince her otherwise. And Billy says, what if you can't convince her? A pretty thin kind of idea they've got. And Flint says he'll do his best, but if he feels it isn't happening, then he'll make it clear everyone on the crew is to be taken back safely to the beach. And this is where he shows, we see he has a small blade hidden in his boot. So yeah, he's going to threaten her, it would seem. Let them go or I'll kill her. And yeah, as Silver points out, if he could ever get that close to her, even in the first place, which he probably wouldn't, he would never make it out alive. Yeah, just when it seems like we were getting back to something we know a bit more with Flint, we can still see, he's not quite up to his usual standards when it comes to thinking on his feet and thinking up plans. But he is thinking unselfishly and solely for the crew, I suppose, in this moment, as Billy will sort of say in a moment. It's still not him. It's still not, a Flint plan. It's still very much a man giving up, but trying to do something good in his last moment, I guess, is what is kind of going on. So yeah, we get a little scene with Mrs. Scott speaking to his wife. She's saying she'll listen to what Flint has to say, but it's not looking too hopeful. And then she leaves and Maddie has a little moment with him. She tells him he's her father and she loves him, but she does not know him, and we can see that. The chemistry isn't there, but yeah, we can see it's two people that just don't really know each other very well, haven't seen a lot of each other. Yeah, they don't know each other very well. They don't know the ins and outs of each other's lives, really. And afterwards, clearly upset, Silver sort of spots her upset, crying, from behind the bars. A little attraction, compassion, building up here by the looks of it already. And yeah, excited to get further into their development. So yeah, Billy approaches Silver and they chat about Flint's plan. Silver is against it. He knows it could lose them both their captain and their potential allies. Billy's just thinking of escape. He's not really seeing the bigger picture with the Maroons and building a bigger crew. It's very much let's get out of here. Whereas Silver is, thinking more like Flint of old now, just bigger picture. So yeah, Silver observes, you seem eager to be rid of him, and Billy sort of points out, of course I am. He says they propped him up because of his strength as captain was, what kept us alive. So basically now he's not strong, sod him, is sort of what Billy's saying. But he says, if he's willing to sacrifice himself for our safe passage, it might be the first selfless thing he's ever done since we've known him. And he asks Silver, if that's what Flint wants, don't get in his way, sort of thing. Damn, that's pretty heavy from Billy, but there's still a lot of fear in the situation they're in at the moment with Billy, I think, because he can't honestly think this plan of Flint's would work, and they'd all still get off the island. It just seems so unfeasible, even though, yeah, it would be a selfless thing. These guys have just got it on lock and it would just never work. Yeah, I can't see it working. But we're starting to see this rivalry really being brought to the surface again. A bit of hatred and obsession, taking over sense a little bit here with Billy. Yeah, a small example this episode, but we will only, unfortunately, start to see that get worse with Billy as time progresses, that kind of obsession. His argument, it does make sense that it would be a huge selfless act for the crew, putting them first. But Billy, he's not a leader at the moment. He's not had to make these tough calls like Flint has. Yeah, Silver is looking out for his captain's best interest because he knows it ultimately is still in all their best interests at the moment. While Billy, I think, sees this as a great opportunity just to be rid of the man he really hates once and for all now. So yeah, at night now, and Silver sits and talks with Flint, tells him all about Billy, about their conversation, that he doesn't give a shit if he dies tomorrow, but jokes that he probably knew that. He says he should be with Billy, really. Until recently, he's sure he would have been, unbothered by him trading his life for the cruise. But says right now that he's bothered by it. But he understands the law in ensuring no one thinks he's the villain he is. Yeah, interesting choice of words by the writers. Silver saying he understands the law in dying a hero, not a villain. Finally giving up the fight for a good reason. Get where I'm sort of going with this. Final episode. Flint's final fate as told by Silver. Yeah, very interesting. Foreshadowing's not the right word, but yeah, anyway, I'm getting too far ahead of myself, but interesting choice of words by Silver for sure. So yeah, Silver speaking very casually in this conversation, like this conversation they're having isn't going to play a huge part in Flint's decision. But But yeah, he's just planting a little seed. You know, he knows what he's doing. I think he knows now he can't demand, he can't beg and plea. He's tried all that before. He knows it doesn't work with Flint. He just has to speak to him man to man. And he sort of says casually, you know, if Flint wanted to, he could still talk the men into anything. And then he sort of just leaves him to ponder on it. Flint finally at the crossroads here. He has to make a decision. To talk the Queen round, it's going to mean that he has to believe the words that he's saying. It can't just be some spiel. Can't be a lie. It has to be real like it always was before, because that's who he is. But yeah, at the end of the day, does he believe that he can continue this fight? Has Silver done enough? With this added element of Silver and Billy, it's almost a little bit like he's got an angel and a devil kind of on his shoulder. It's up to the viewer, I guess, who is playing who. Is Billy playing angel, wanting Flint to sacrifice himself for a greater good, for your crew, you know, who you've put through so much? And is it Silver that's the devil, you know, temptation, get back to that ruthless, unstoppable leader you once was, get that fight back, get a war started again? Or looking at it another way, you could switch them. Is Billy wanting him to give up a selfish, bad move that's not the way out he thinks it will be? And is Silver kind of playing the angel, giving him a pep talk and helping him out of this despair, stirring some fight in him in this honourable path that he's kind of been pursuing? Maybe I've overthought that, but it's an interesting concept anyway. So Flint is led to the Queen, and back in the cage, the crew realise, you know, Billy and Silver mainly, that he has left the weapon behind. So yeah, Silver has at least talked him round, at least out of the plan he had. So yeah, another fantastic scene. It's really hard to pick my favourite scene this episode between this one and the Max and Eleanor scene. I think they're both fantastic kind of scenes between two very strong characters. Straight away, Flint is talking facts. The proposed union, you know, that Mr. Scott suggested, it just isn't enough because she doesn't trust him, he says. So he says, so let's assume I can offer you something better. And he talks about how they, the Maroons, have remained hidden until now under a thin veil. But now Mr. Scott is lying here dying. That veil has been unravelled. Brings up England, how it takes whatever it wants. It's taken from him, and he knows it's taken from them. And sooner or later, they will be found, and England will come for more. And confused, she asks, you think you can help, you know, us from stopping England from taking these things? And Flint says simply, no. I am suggesting we help each other start taking things back. Damn, the passion he says that with. Again, like I say, if he didn't mean those words, she would feel it. She'd feel it. That's exactly what she was sort of saying. She wants to know he's telling the truth, and you can see he believes this. He's back with his plan, and he's thought of this plan, and he knows this union can happen, so he's believing it. And he says it starts with Nassau. You know, this camp secrecy is under a thin veil now, but Nassau will provide for them. Understandably, you know, she brings up Woodes Rogers, how he's got the island on lock, pretty much. But he counters. He doesn't know the ins and outs of the fort. He's facing an administrative nightmare after the mess kind of Jack left it in. And most importantly, men, though placated now, could be awoken. Men he could awaken. Says in thinking he was dead and the cause hopeless, they turned. So he will come back from the dead and lay claim to what he is owed. Whew. Man, yeah, this guy, when he's on form, there's just no stopping him, is there? He's gone. He could talk you into anything. So yeah, it's really good to see him, you know, back in this place again. Says there's more people like them, you know, on this island, people enslaved on other islands and part of this system. People that on seeing Nassau overthrown will follow and join their cause, you know, when they see an alliance of pirates and slaves. Obviously, again, the big tie-in to my title of the episode. He's definitely doing the job with us, the audience, and as he's speaking passionately, we see a little hint of a smile from her. Just the corner of her mouth kind of goes up. She's definitely invested in this plan, I think it's safe to say. Stirring some belief in her, some passion. Bring down Nassau, maybe bring it all down, he says as a big finish. Yeah, phenomenal scene that just speaks for itself. Really not much to add. Flint is back with a cause and a fight he believes in. He was in a slump, you know, that Silver and his own subconscious, I think, had to drag him out from a little bit. But yeah, he's not ready to give up anymore, and he still has some more fight in him. And now with some allies in the Maroons, it's a whole new force coming to make Woodes Rogers' life a little bit more difficult. The crew are released and Silver sees Flint being given back his coat. Yeah, remember when he got that coat and he put it on last season, you know, after a great power play against Dufresne. So yeah, now out the cage, Silver says to him he didn't think there was a chance in hell that was going to work. And Flint sort of almost jokingly says, neither did I. Pauses and says thank you for opening that door. See brass tacks, down to business Flint is always great. But when he holds on to some humanity as well, it just makes him one of the best characters, you know, in any TV show. So complex, dynamic now, a real friendship, partnership and respect really being built after all they've kind of been through, just already this season especially. So yeah, when Silver asks, you know, what now, Flint passionately sort of says they're going to go get supplies, get a force behind them again, and to do that, they need to find Charles Vane. And yeah, both Flint and Silver will pick up MVP nominations. So actually, yeah, let's just jump straight into that and get someone that win, because that is such a great episode. But I think I'm pretty much all done on that. So yeah, let's get into awarding an MVP.
Last item.
Okay, yeah, so Max, Flint or Silver? Oh, okay, so yeah, if she hadn't have picked up quite a soft win in that first episode, I might fight for Max's case a little bit more here. And yeah, and while I do love that she stands tall and thinks fast, holds her own against Woods, Rogers and Eleanor, I think Flint and Silver's shouts are that little bit louder for me this episode. So yeah, the question is, do I give Flint the full credit for his inspirational speech and his rise from the dark place that he's been in, or does Silver deserve the credit for pulling him out of that dark spot in the first place, giving him a bit of encouragement, sticking up for him against Billy a little bit? It's tough, and maybe I probably should go with Silver, but I'm going to go with Flint. He's been lost a couple of episodes now, and sure, yeah, there's always the what if Silver hadn't have spoken to him, would we still have had the same result? But it's too big a Flint scene and a big moment, and just a rise back up to his usual form for what ifs for me. So I've got to give Flint the MVP for this one. So that takes him up to 4. So yeah, let's actually have a look now at the halfway point, like with the ratings, and let's check in on how the all-time MVP scores are looking at this moment. So yeah, this is everyone on 1. Teach on the board now with 1 already. And then we have a few in at joint third. So yeah, we got Billy, Matt, Silver, Jack and Anne all on 2, ready to move up, hopefully at some point to get some more. Charles Vane is in second now. He's still on 3. He's no longer in first. Captain James Flint in first. He's shot up this season. He's got 2 already. But yeah, you know, with 2 stars, it's only a couple of episodes wins in it. So all to play for. Okay, so yeah, that is episode 5 done. So next couple of weeks is my 40th birthday weekend, and then the weekend after is Brixham Pirate Festival. So I'm going to be quite busy over the next couple of weeks. So I will probably only get 1 episode out, I think, over the next couple of weeks. I'm not sure when, just a heads up with that. But yeah, otherwise, yeah, I will see you with episode 6 very soon. Yeah, getting into this last part, this last half of the season now, where, yeah, these last few episodes are just going to be chaotic. But yeah, as always, guys, thank you for watching. Take care, and I will catch you very soon. Peace out. Bye.